Hi and welcome to this DCP web tutorial. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be giving you a beginner's guide to using Davinci Resolve 17. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is make sure we've got Davinci Resolve 17 installed on our computer. So to do that, I've already made a tutorial. I made this a few weeks ago. So what I suggest is you just follow the instructions in this particular video. I'm going to put a link to that in the YouTube description. So one thing to note is when you're watching this video, you can watch it to learn how to install Davinci Resolve. But in the YouTube description, you'll see Davinci Resolve download here, the 17 download. Click on that link and make sure that you scroll down the page. And when you scroll down the page, it's very important that you get to this section here. So you'll see these little purple boxes, right? Free download and find a seller, like these options here. What I do is I click on this red button here, the free version. Make sure you click on that one, not this one here, because we're going to use the free version of Davinci Resolve. Okay, so in order to follow this tutorial, we need to download some content. Now you can use your own content, but I suggest that you download the video content that I'm going to show to you now, because that will give you access to free content first of all, and then you'll be able to follow this tutorial a bit more concisely. So if we minimize this browser window and open up this folder, inside this folder, you'll see three directories. You're going to see video content, images and audio. So just create a folder on your desktop or somewhere on your machine and create three simple folders, one called video content, one called images and one called audio. So if we go into the video, we'll see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 videos, and these 7 videos are themed around creating a pizza, right? So that's kind of the content that I wanted to create. Now I'm going to put links to all of these videos in the YouTube description so you can download them for free as well. So let's just take a quick look at as an example. What we'll do is we will just open up the web browser and I'm going to go to a website called Pexels, right? So I'm going to click here and go to this website, and you'll find all the links to the different videos in the YouTube description. When you download the videos, you want to click here and then make sure you always download them at 1920 by 1080 and then click this green free download button. There's 7 videos to download in total. We also want to download a few images. Most of the images come from Pexels and there's only a handful, so let's just quickly look at them. Let's go back here, go into images. You can see there's only 3 images, right? There's this one of this pizza sign, there's this girl eating this pizza, and then there's this little sort of cartoon character. So we want to download all 3 of these. These 2 here come from the same website and this one comes from a different one. So let me just show you that quickly as an example. Let's just copy this link. Again, I'll put all the images in the YouTube description. Click free download and try and download the highest resolution that you can find, like the biggest file, right? And just click download. And then also one other image we're going to get from a different website called Pixabay, and we'll click here, and then this particular picture we'll click free download, and you can just download it at 1280 by 1280 and just click the free download button. It's a transparent PNG file because we want to work with transparency as well. So if we minimize this, the last thing we need to do is download audio content. And this audio, I've taken it from YouTube's audio library, right? So if we open up the web browser again, just go to YouTube's audio library. I'll put a link to that in the YouTube description as well. And in the search bar here, in the search filters, we want to search for, let's see, we want to search for Seaside. And when we search for Seaside, we'll see Seaside Piazza here. And we want to download. Click this download button here and that will download the audio. So now you should have all of the content to follow this tutorial. What I suggest is in the YouTube description for the videos, I'm going to put the videos, list them in the same order as how I'm going to present the tutorial, right? From 01, 02, 03, 04, 5, 6 and 7. So if you just look at this little notepad file, this is what I'm going to be uploading to adding to the description. These are the same 7 video links, but they've got their own file names, right? So when you download the first one, you want to label it 01, and then when you download this one, you want to rename it 02 and so forth. That will just make it a bit easier for you to follow this tutorial, and you can apply the same logic to the images. And there's only one audio track, so we don't really need to rename that. You'll see that I've renamed the images 1, 2 and 3, and they're in the same sequence here as well. So when you click on them, just rename them, and then when I'm dragging and dropping them into Davinci Resolve, you'll be able to follow the tutorial a lot easier. Okay, let's go ahead and open up Davinci Resolve. So I'm going to go to my start menu, and after you've installed Davinci Resolve, you should see an icon on your desktop, but typically I delete all icons from my desktop. So I'm going to scroll down, click on Blackmagic Design here, Blackmagic Design, and then click on Davinci Resolve here. So we'll wait for the application to load up. Okay, Davinci Resolve is loaded up, and this is the splash screen, right? So here you can access your old projects. So here's a couple of examples of projects I did previously, but we want to create a new project here, new project. So we're going to click new project, and we need to give it a title. So we're going to call this pizza video, right? Something like pizza video, and we'll click create button. So it's saying that there's an update for Davinci Resolve, right? 16 is beta 6. So if you see this screen here, you should really download the latest update. So I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so I downloaded and installed the latest version. So we're back to this screen here, and we've got our pizza project video project open. And the first thing we want to do is get our content into Davinci Resolve. Now you can see you've got media, cut, edit, fusion, color, Fairlight, and delivery. So we're going to go through some of these tabs down here at the bottom. But our first goal is to get content into the media pool. So we click media here, media, and it says no clips in the media pool. There's a few different ways to get content into Davinci Resolve, but by far the most easy is just to push this to one side, open up this folder, right? So we've got this folder here, and we just go to video, select them all, and just drag and drop them into Davinci Resolve. Now you can see all the video clips in here. Now the videos are not being stored in here, right? The videos are being referenced from this folder. So I'm going to explain something in a moment, but let's just grab the images and drag them in here, and then we'll grab the audio and also drag that into here. Now when you create a folder, let's say on this desktop, and we create this folder, and then you start to move content to a different location, Davinci Resolve is not going to be able to find that content, and that might actually cause a problem, right? It might start saying media offline inside when you come back to edit this later. So I'm going to show you a little example of how to fix that. Or in fact, what I'll do is I'll put a link in the YouTube description showing you how to fix media offline as well. So if you ever see that sign where it says media offline, I'll put a link in the YouTube description showing you how to fix that. But for now, we've got all of the content in here, and if we click on any of these clips, whether it's audio or video, we can click it here and we can see the preview monitor here, and then we can just scrub across. This is an image. We can just scrub across the video clip like this, and we can just see what that content looks like. You can click the play button if you like, and then we can just move across it, and you've got this little jog wheel, and this little jog wheel is almost like moving it frame by frame, so you can just click it and jog across small increments, right? So really this is about viewing the content rather than editing it. So we're going to move on to editing content next. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is move over to the edit tab here. This is the cutting tab actually. So this one here is the cut tab, and you can kind of do the cutting actually in the edit tab here as well. I just want to show you how to use this cutting tab because it's quite useful as well. So we'll click here and we come into this interface. Now we've got all the video clips and our audio clips and stuff up here. I may or may not use all of them in this particular tutorial, but we'll try and use some of it at least, right? So let's say we take this first clip here. This is the first one that I want to use. I'm going to double click on it, double left click, and then it brings it into the preview monitor here. So I can take this little red cursor here, the timeline cursor up here, and scrub across the video and work out what content do I want to keep from this particular clip. So I want to keep the beginning part, and then the lady kind of turns around at this sort of point, right? So around here, I want to cut the video clip around here. And what you'll notice is at the top here, you've got the full duration of the clip, right? So it's 8 seconds, and we're cutting it down to like 4 seconds, right? Just over 4 seconds. So let's just round that up to, let's see, around 5 would be a good number, right? 5 seconds here. So I want to cut the video clip here. All I'll do is drag this bottom handle here, this little one at the bottom here on the right hand side, and drag it across, and then just place it here, and then left click inside of the timeline here. And now I've cut that clip, I can just drag that clip onto the timeline here. Now what you'll notice with this timeline down here, if you click on this red cursor and try and move it, it doesn't work, right? This red cursor is a static point, this timeline point. It's the actual film strip above that you left click and drag across. So you sort of think about this as like almost like real film on a table, and what you would do is take that film and you drag it across the timeline cursor here. Yeah, so you click above on this timeline part here and drag with your left mouse button to move across the timeline. You'll see what's going on up here. So we can drag across towards the end, and then we can think about a second video, and it would make sense that we maybe move to this particular clip. So we double click it, and we can see the lady's got her hands, and she's kind of, we've got this pizza thing going on here, right? But it's got this black at the beginning. We don't really want that, so we're going to move across the timeline to around here, and we're going to drag this handle this time and drag it across to this point, and then we'll keep moving across this video clip. It's like 11 seconds long, and I think we'll cut it down to around, say around 7 seconds, right? Let's just cut it around here. I think around here will be good, something like here, and then we'll just drag this handle all the way across to this point on the timeline, and then we'll just drag this clip down onto drag it from here down onto the player down here. Then remember, click around here somewhere and then left click and drag across, and you can see there's a jump cut here between the two clips, and we'll add a transition. You don't have to, but we'll do that in the next step, adding transitions. So we've got two parts to it, and the next thing I think will be good is to have this sort of peppers, right? So we'll double click on these peppers, and we see this person cutting these peppers, and we want to cut. I think the beginning part is fine, right? It shows it nicely cut, and it will get to a point where he's finished cutting and he'll move the pepper away. So I would say around, let's say around here I want to cut it, right? So I'm going to move my cursor to there, grab this handle, drag it across here, and then we'll just click here, or click on the timeline here, down here, and then drag and drop this here. And we can move across the timeline. He's cutting these peppers, all good. And then we'll get to another part. Let's see, grating cheese, right? So we'll double click this one, and we can see this person grating some cheese. The beginning part is fine, and then he'll kind of reveals the cheese, right? And he kind of moves it over to here. So let's say around when his hands go off the screen around here, we want to cut it. So we'll just drag this across, and we can then just click down here and then drag and drop this here. Now we move across the timeline, and we have the pizza making part, right? Now what I did notice about this clip is if I double click on this one here, video 5, if I scrub through it, let's grab this back. Let's just scrub through this video. So he's putting down the base, putting some cheese and everything on, and at the end he puts like this yellow sort of cheese, right? And what I noticed is in this particular video clip number 6, if I double click that one, it's basically a cut of that same video clip. He's just putting the cheese on again. So we don't really need number 6, because 5 and 6 are almost like, well, 6 is a cut of number 5, right? So we'll double click on 5 and we'll just use this clip. We don't need to use number 6. So we drag across, and I think, let's see. See, his hand kind of goes away almost like here. So I'm going to cut it here, and we'll just drag this handle across, and we'll cut it like this. We'll click inside and then just drag and drop that onto the timeline. And the rest of our content, let's see, we've got one more picture actually, one more clip. Let's just drag across here, and we've got this like pizza flyover sort of scene here. So someone's grabbing the pizza, it's kind of flying over like this, and we might just keep the full duration of this because it looks pretty cool. So let's just drag that onto the timeline. So you've done with your editing, and you'll notice there's a clip here now called timeline, right? Timeline. Let's just save our work, save project. Okay, so now that we've done the basic cutting of our video clip, we can see that on the timeline here. We can move over to the editor. So when we go to edit here, we can see automatically all of our sequence has been placed onto the timeline, and we can scrub through the timeline and we can see all of our content. And we want to add transitions, we add a little intro and a few other bits to this content. Now you'll notice that there's a blue bar and there's a green bar. The green bar represents audio and the blue bar above represents the video clip, and we want to get rid of this audio. Although there isn't actually any audio in the clip itself, it does have an audio channel, so we can just right click on here and then we can do link clip here, click it, and it will unlink the clip. Then you can left click outside and then click on the green audio clip. Now do not hit the delete key, you need to hit the backspace key, or you can right click here and you can select delete selected, right, backspace. If you click the delete key, it will actually delete the video above as well. So we just click select delete selected, and it will remove the audio only. Then you can move across the timeline. You can click on the next video clip. If that happens to have audio, you can right click, unlink it, and you can click here, select that particular clip, right click and delete selected. And we'll move across the timeline and repeat that for all of the clips. Now you can see the timeline is zoomed in quite far, so you can use this tool here to zoom in and zoom out, and we can see quite quickly now that this very last clip has audio. So we can just right click, unlink it, click outside, select the video clip, and then we'll hit the backspace key to delete it. Now we've got all of our audio, or our video should we say, without any audio. That's what we want. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is add some transitions between our video clips. We don't want them to just be simple jump cuts, right? So it will just jump cut like this. And you can have it like that if you want, but it'll be nice to show you how to add transitions between these clips. So what we're going to do is left click in between two clips, then right click on them and add a 24 frame crossfade. And it will add a crossfade. It's a bit hard to see, so I'm going to zoom right in onto the timeline. Let's zoom in here, and now you can see this crossfade here, right? And if we go over to the toolbox, so make sure effects library is enabled at the top here, and under video transitions you can see these different types of transitions. So when you scrub across here, it will show you an example of different types of transitions that you can use. Now if you want to use this particular transition, let's say for example the oval transition like this, you just grab that transition and drag it over the crossfade here. Now when we scrub across it, you'll see that you have that particular type of crossfade. So let's apply that to the rest of the video clips. We can just drag this little bar down here to move across the timeline, and we'll just right click here and add a 24 frame. And sometimes Davinci Resolve will say that there's not enough sufficient handles to apply the transition. Click trim clips here, and it will do a small trim, and then you'll be able to add your transition. Then you can drag and drop the oval one. So I'm going to use the same transition, but you can go and experiment. There's quite a lot of different ones here, like barn doors and push, and look, there's loads and loads and loads of different ones here for you to go and experiment with, right? But I prefer to use a specific transition for all of the clips rather than some random thing, but it's your choice, right? You can use whatever you like. So I'm just going to right click here, add this, click trim, and then we'll just drag this on top here, and we'll just continue that process throughout all of the clips so that we've got our transition set up, and then we can show you what to do next. So let's just drag this to here, and we'll scrub across, and this is the final one I believe. We'll right click, add 24 frame. So 24 frames will be 1 second duration, right? 24 frames, and we can drag and drop that here as well. So now we can see that we've got this nice transition, right? Now we can make some adjustments to these transitions. So if I move to the very beginning of the timeline, this is the first transition, right? So if we click on it and then go to the inspector up here, there's something called inspector, and we can see some options in here. It tells us the duration is 1 second. It tells us 24 frames. If you want to change the transition, you can click here and change it to like clock wipe, for example. Then you've got a different type of transition, right? So you can easily select the transitions from the top here, but we want to stick with the oval transition here, and you can manipulate the shape of the transition. So here you can see you can change its alignment, right? You can change the alignment. Here you can change its direction, whether it's in or out. So we're going to leave it on in. You can offset it as well, so you can place it in a different position. So if you want to do some sort of a different type of transition, you can offset it as well. We'll click on it and we'll set the offset back to 0, I believe. And you can add like borders to it, and then you can suggest a color. So you can say the border needs to be red, then you can have a red colored border, right? You can do things like this. Here you can see the red colored border. I don't really want that, so with the border, let's see, let's turn that all the way down, and you can just leave it like that. You can also add the border and add a feather to it, so it's got like a little bit, you know, a little bit of a feather around the edge like this. But I'm going to stick with a nice transition like this. I think this is better. And one thing to do, and I suggest that you do this, is to use the ease in and ease out options here. And this will just add a Bezier curve to the transition, and it will make it a lot smoother. So if we go back and click the play button, you'll see the transition has kind of a gradual fade at the end, and it just looks a little bit better. So let's go ahead and apply that to all the other transitions. To do that, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can see more of the timeline. You can also hold down the Alt key So you can hold down the Alt key and use your mouse wheel to zoom in and out. And we'll click on this transition here. Let's just click on this one. Zoom in a little bit more. Click on this particular transition. And we'll set it to the Bezier curve here. We'll click on this one. This transition over here. And we'll also set that to in and out. And let's just make sure it's doing that. We'll click play. And that looks fine. Then we can just move across the timeline, click on this one, and then we'll set that to ease in and out, and click on the very last one and set that to ease in and out. It seems to already be done. I guess you could hold down the shift key and probably multi-select them and do it in one go, but as a beginner example, that's I think a good example of how to add transitions. And you just go and experiment with them. There's so many in here, it's impossible for me to go through every single one and explain them all to you. So it's down for you to now go and experiment and see which transitions you like to add to your video clips. Okay, let's go ahead and click on the very first video clip, and when we click on it, we'll get the video tab up here, right? Video tab, and this allows us to manipulate this particular video clip. So we can change, we can zoom in and out, we can change its position. So if we want to, if it's not quite right, it's not set correctly, we can use this. We can also use this dynamic option, which will kind of give us like a default dynamic zoom, right? Like this. Let's set these values back to their original values. You can just press Ctrl Z to undo, right, and redo. We'll set this back to 1, I believe. Let's just set it back to 1 here. And this is linked together. Can you see they're linked? So whatever value I change here, it will also change it on the corresponding side here as well. And you can change its position, so you can manipulate its position here. We'll set this back to 0 for now. Let's just set it to 0. And we'll be back to our original clip as it was. And you can rotate it, so you can just rotate your clip, right? You can set that back to a value of 0 as well, and you can change its anchor point. And this is really for the pitch and the yaw. So you can pitch the video clip and you can change its its yaw here, and you can also flip the video, right? You can flip it over, and you can also flip it on the vertical and the horizontal. So let's just set these values back to zeros. This is for you to go and experiment with, but one thing I will show you is on the zoom, for example. I don't know if you ever use Blender or some other types of animation software like After Effects, or even in Premiere Pro, we can add keyframes. So you see these little dots here, these represent keyframes. So when I click this first little dot, if I unclick it, let's just zoom into this first video clip so we can see it a bit clearer. Let's just zoom in here. So I can see almost just that one video clip now here on the timeline. As soon as I click this little dot here, it will add a keyframe at the very beginning of this video clip, and you'll see these little options appear down here. And if I click on this first option, it will show me the Bezier curve for this keyframe. But there is no curve at the moment because there's no second keyframe. So if we scrub across the timeline, let's say to about like the midpoint, and we add another keyframe here, a second keyframe, then we can zoom in a little bit, right? Zoom in a little bit, something like this. And if you can see the zoom effect here, right? So it's starting from its original point and it's zooming in. So if we go back on the timeline, let's scrub back, we can have this little zoom effect in here like this. And then we can select both of these keyframes here, and we can add a curve to it just to smooth it out a little bit. So you can experiment with these curves. You can have it flat, you can have it transition in different ways. So this will just smooth out the transition, right, like this. So it will just look a little bit better. So I'm going to leave it like that. I want it to kind of zoom in a little bit and do its thing like this. So let's go ahead and click on that same icon, and that will bring us out of that particular view. So in this part of the tutorial, we just showing you some of the attributes in here. There's other things in here. I'll leave you to go and experiment. Really, you should go and read up on the manual Davinci Resolve. But those are like the basic concepts of using these particular tools, especially using the keyframing. I think that's quite important to learn and understand. Okay, so at present we already have video content on our timeline. We should really be saving our work. So let's save our project, and we've got some images in here, right? We downloaded, I believe, 2 or 3 images. I don't think I'm going to use them all in this particular tutorial, but I want to use this pizza one. I want that to kind of be the intro, right, the beginning. So what I'm going to do is right click on it. In fact, what you should do first of all is make sure your timeline is set to the beginning of the video clip, right at the very beginning. Then you can right click and you can insert clip into timeline, and it will insert it into the beginning of the timeline here, right? And this is set to a specific duration. So I think it's well, in fact, let's just double check. We can just right click on it and we can go to change clip duration, and when we click on that, we can see that it's set to 5 seconds. So it's 5 seconds, probably a bit too long, so we can just click inside the timeline here, the time code, and just set it to 4 seconds and click change, and then it will reduce that particular size of that clip there, right? Now we just need to close this gap. There's a few different ways to do that, but a nice easy way is just to press Control A. Control A will select everything, hold down the Control key, and then click on the image itself, and then you can just drag these and it will snap over here like this, and it's job done, because it will ripple and move all of the content because you've selected it all, right? So that's a nice easy way to do it. And now we've got this pizza here, but it's pretty static, and you can see these black bars down the side. We don't want to see these black bars, so we're going to click on the image itself and go back to the inspector here, and we can see video. It's labeled video, really it's a picture, right? But we can still change the size of it. So we're going to zoom in a little bit to about here, and we're going to change its position on the Y. So we're going to bring it down a little bit so we can see the word pizza there, like this, something like this. Okay, so the picture itself right now is very static on our timeline, and we don't really want it to be still, right? So we're going to move to the very beginning of the timeline, and we're going to add some keyframes in so that we can manipulate it a little bit. So we're going to add one for the zoom, and we're going to add one for the position. We're going to add 2 different keyframes, and we're going to scrub all the way down to the end of this particular clip, and we're just going to use the arrow key to move back 1 frame, right? So at the very end of this particular this pizza clip, right at the very end, the very last frame, and we're going to add another keyframe and another keyframe, and we can just manipulate the zoom a little bit. So we're going to zoom in a small amount, and we're just going to bring this down a little bit, and I think what we'll do is actually add a rotation keyframe as well. Let's add a rotation one, and let's go back to the beginning as well, and we'll add a keyframe for the rotation here. Then we can go back to the end, press the left arrow key to go back 1 frame, and then we can rotate this pizza just a small amount. Let's just rotate it a small amount like here, and then we can just adjust its position, bring it down a little bit, maybe to about here, and then we want to zoom in a bit more to something like this, right? Now we can see that we've got some movement in our still image, so it's not just still. We can click here and go to the Bezier curve, and we can see if we zoom in a little bit, let's just zoom in a little bit, we can see the keyframes here. We can just left click, select both of them, and then we can just add a curve to them just so that they're not so static. Let's try and select them again. Let's click them, hold down the shift key. You can select both of them using the shift key, and then we can add the transition here, and that will just smooth out this pizza effect, right? It will look a bit better. So sometimes I think maybe inside, yeah. So if you're outside of the clip and you try and select it, it won't select them, right? So you have to be inside of the clip, this black box you could say, and then you can left click, highlight that one on this side here, and then drag across and select that one. You can set your interpolation, that's what it's actually called, right? This Bezier curve, like this. So I'll leave you to go and experiment with that. That's how I like it. And the thing that's missing right now is the transition. So we're just going to click in between the clips, right click and add our transition. We'll click trim clip here. So we've got a transition here. Right now it's just a cross dissolve. So it's just going to cross dissolve like this. But let's maybe use something a bit different. Let's see, what's this 3D flip? I'm not sure about that one. Let's click on the transition. Let's see. So that one's quite interesting. So there's some really nice things that you can do in here, right? You've got paint ones. There's so many in here. It's just ridiculous. This one's quite nice. Rotate, panning. I quite like this one here, right? Slash push. So let's drag that onto the transition, and then we can go back, hit the space bar to play it, and we can see what it looks like. Now sometimes on the timeline, depending on your GPU and stuff, it may not play so smoothly, but when you render this out, it will look a lot better, yeah? It will look a lot better. Let's just click on that one, go to the transition here. Let's click on the transition itself, right? So click out and then click on the transition, and in here, let's see, everything seems to be set up okay, so I don't think we really need to change anything in here. On some of them you can change the easing in and easing out. On some of them you can't, right? But you can change things like the angle in here. You can change the angle, you can change other things. So depending on the transition, the attributes for it might be different. So you can increase the amount of slices, you can keep it like 3, something quite simple. So let's see what 3 looks like. Let's scrub back and we'll click play. You kind of got 3 here. I think it was set to around 8 before, so maybe we'll leave it on 8 on its default. But you've got to go and play around with the settings, and there's so many different options in here to play around with. It's very difficult to go through all of them in this beginner's tutorial, but we're doing pretty well. One thing we want to do is just fade this video clip in. So when we or the actual video. So to do that, there's a little white cursor or a little white marker in the top left hand corner. We can just drag that and it will tell us how long this fade is, right? So if I drag it all the way to this position, that's 2 seconds, that's too long. So we're probably going to fade it for like 1 second. You can see it says 1 second there. Now when we let go, we've got a black frame and we click play and it will fade in nicely like this. That's how we can quickly fade in our video content. Okay, so we just faded in the video content or this image, and it would make sense that we do in for the very last clip. So we'll scrub all the way down to the end and we'll get to this pizza at the end, and we're just going to drag this handle and we're going to drag it to 1 second as well, so that it will fade out nicely. So we click on the timeline here, click the play button, it's going to fade out nicely like this. Now the next thing we want to do really is get the audio in here, right? So we didn't use all the images. I don't really think this image is suitable, to be fair, for this particular tutorial, so I'm not going to use it. You don't have to use everything that we've gathered in this tutorial, but one thing we do want to do is put the audio on there. So let's scrub all the way to the beginning of the timeline. We're at the beginning. We'll drag this audio onto or below the video. Now if we look at this audio, if we scrub across, there's no audio at the beginning, right? It starts around here. Let's just go back. So right around here is where it starts. It's a little bit hard to see, but if I zoom in, you can see there's like the audio is very flat here, and then it starts to play around here. So we want to cut the audio here, get rid of this empty part, and then we can drag this audio to the beginning. So to cut it, we're going to use the cut tool here, edit blade, the blade tool, and we're just going to go to the timeline, make sure our cursor is in the right position, and then left click once, then go back to the selection tool and click on that particular content. And remember, don't delete, use the backspace key. And when you use the backspace key, it will delete only the selection, and then we can drag this to the beginning of our timeline over here. Let's just go back, let's drag it all the way to the beginning, and we can go and click play. Okay, so we're doing pretty well. Let's just move across the timeline because this audio might be way too long, right? You can see it's going all the way off down here somewhere, and we don't want that. So we're going to drag the cursor to the end of the video clip, and we'll take our cut tool and we'll cut this audio at the end as well. So we're going to cut it at the end, and then we'll take our selection tool, select the part that we don't want, and then hit the backspace key. And we can also fade out the audio, so we can grab that same handle, and like we're fading out the video, we can fade out the audio, but the audio I want to fade it out over a 2 second duration, so it kind of fades out over a longer duration. And we should be able to see the mixer here, and we can see the UV meters here, right, to make sure we can see the audio. And they're around let's see, they're peaking at around 15 minus 10, and that's kind of okay for this video. But normally audio yeah, around minus 10, minus 5, between minus 5, minus 10, around minus 12, those sort of numbers tend to be not too loud, but loud enough for people to hear, right? So I think that's okay, but you can adjust the volume here as well. So if you want to increase the decibels, you can increase them on the left and right channel, try and set them to even numbers, right? Makes sense, something like this, and it'll be a little bit louder. I think that's probably going to be okay. Let's just go back to the beginning. we can click the home button on our keyboard, home, and that will take us to the beginning of the timeline. Let's click play. And this is probably a bit too loud. Whenever you see like, if I click play, if it ever goes into the red here, then it's probably a bit too loud. It might distort. You can see it's going into the red, so let's reduce this. Maybe we'll set it to, you can't click and type a specific number, which is a bit annoying, but let's just set it to like +1 dB, around +1. I'm sure there's another way to do this as well. I think we can do this in the audio editing later, but we'll set it to around +1. Let's just check that. I think that will be okay. So we've edited the audio a little bit and we've added the audio, so we're pretty much done. But let's go through a few other things before we finish. Okay, let's go ahead and save our work. So let's go to File, Save. And we've been through these first 3 tabs and we're going to go to Fusion. Now Fusion is really beyond the scope of this tutorial. It's quite complex to understand, and I fully don't understand it right now, so I don't want to try and explain something to you that I don't fully understand. But it's basically about creating effects, right, in Davinci Resolve. So it's a very, very powerful tool. And if you go to YouTube and you type in Davinci Resolve Fusion tutorial, I'm sure you're going to find lots and lots and lots of talented people out there that understand how to use Davinci Resolve Fusion way better than I do. I have made a few tutorials on it about particle effects and a few different things, but I'm going to be spending quite a bit of time learning this part of this particular tool, and as and when I gain that knowledge and skills, I'll create separate tutorials explaining how to use it, right? But let's move on to the next tab, and the next tab is color. Okay, so in this section of Davinci Resolve, we can start to look at each individual video clip. So we can scrub across this timeline, right? We can click on video clips like this and we can move across them, and we can click on this first clip, which is the pizza, right? And we can move to a point on the timeline where we can see it quite clearly. And then we've got these channels here. We've got the luminance. So if we were to drag this white handle, we can darken things. Wherever there's light, we can make it much darker, or wherever there's light, we can make it much brighter, right? So we can manipulate the image or its colors here. Now, obviously there's lots and lots of different options in here. It's a bit too much to try and explain in this basic tutorial, but as a basic understanding, if you click R is for red, the red channel. If you move that all the way down, red gets removed from that particular piece of content, right? And if you drag it across, you can increase the red, and you can move it like up or down on this graph here, right? Down, up and down will remove it, and then moving it left and right will increase or decrease the amount of red. So you can do color balancing in here basically, right? So we'll leave the red exactly where it was. You've got green channel, you can do the same with green. You can increase or decrease and so forth. And then you've got a blue channel here. You can increase or decrease the blue channel as well. So we'll leave this, and this is about finite adjustments, right? It's not about being dramatic like this. It's about manipulating it on small increments in order to get a color balance between all of these particular clips, right? If we were to click on this one, you can see there's a lot of red in there, or with the particular sauce and the tomatoes. So you can increase or decrease that particular color, right? But remember, it's applying it to the whole video clip. Now, I will probably try and do a separate tutorial once I get a bit more up to speed on Davinci Resolve, explaining this color channel options. It's quite complex to understand, but once I gain better skills in it, I'll make a separate video explaining how to do color balancing a bit more accurately, but you can do some basic stuff in here. Okay, so down this side here, we have some Resolve effects, right? So we've got that directional blur, we've got Gaussian blur, we've got lens blur, we've got all of these different options. And I'm just going to show you one quick example of how to use it. So let's take the Gaussian blur, just like in Photoshop or any other tool, we can do blur effects, right? We're going to drag this this cursor to the beginning of the timeline, and we're going to drag this Gaussian blur here on this line here. And now we've got Gaussian blur applied, but right now it's set to a very low value, yeah? You can see there is some blur in there, but it's a very low value. So if I move it to this position and drag this handle, right, you can see the Gaussian blur being applied and removed. So I want to set it all the way to 0. I want it on 0 strength, and I'm going to move the timeline all the way to the beginning. Just sitting at the beginning, you can also see a timeline here. When I click on the little dot here, it will add a keyframe. Can you see the keyframes here? You can manipulate this. You can see that Gaussian blur has been applied here. And I'm going to scrub across the timeline to about this position here, about halfway of this video clip. You can see it's about halfway, and we're going to add another keyframe here. Now we can see the keyframes in here, the two different keyframes. We can click on the little arrow on the side here, and that will take us back to the first keyframe, and then we can increase the Gaussian blur. And now when we scrub across the timeline, we'll have Gaussian blur applied to our video clip as well, right? Like this. And you can go and experiment with this Gaussian blur. You can play around with the settings. Sometimes you've got to play around with settings and see what they do. And that's the way you learn things, right? Just by playing around with the settings. You can apply many effects. You can apply multiple effects. You can do radial blurs. There's like lots and lots of different options. Too many in here to go through one by one. But you can do like keyframing as well. So you can do like Luma keyframe, for example. There's lots of different options, and maybe we'll make some bite-sized tutorials explaining more of this in detail. Let's go over to the next tab, which is the Fairlight, which is to deal with audio. Okay, so in the main editor, if you remember, we selected the option up here to see the mixer, and we can manipulate the audio here. In Fairlight over here, you can actually manipulate it here as well. So you've got options down here, the same options down here. You've got a mixer, you've got all of the different channels. Again, it is quite complex to explain, but if you had many different audio clips, imagine if you dragged a load of sound effects into your content, right? So you've got all of these different sound effects, and you can see this is one here, and this represents audio track 1. So when we scroll across this timeline, we can see the UV meter is moving here only, right? And we can see it down here. But imagine if we had 3, 4, 5, 6 different tracks, and they all had different sound effects. We could manipulate each one of the tracks specifically. So if there's an explosion or something, you want that to be very loud, but you want the music to be very quiet at that point in time, we can use the tools here to do that. Again, it's beyond the scope of this beginner's tutorial. It's quite complex to understand. I don't want to make this tutorial too long, but at least you have a basic understanding of what's going on here in terms of audio. So this is all about audio manipulation. Let's move to the very last frame, or the very last tab, should I say, and this is all about delivering your final content. Okay, so in this section, it's all about delivering the end project, right? It's all about delivering our final video content. So let's scrub to the beginning of the timeline here, and across the top here, you've got various options. So you've got like YouTube, and you can do it at full HD, 1080p, 720p. You've got Vimeo. You've got Vimeo options in here. You've got Twitter options in here, like 720p or 1080p. And you can scrub across this timeline. You've got H.264 for HD. You've got all these different, like you've got Final Cut Pro for Apple Mac. You've got Premiere Pro. You've got loads of different options in here. But typically, for me at least anyway, I do most of my content on YouTube. I'm uploading it to YouTube. So when you click on YouTube, it's going to give you all of the default settings that are suitable for YouTube, but you can still change the frame rate. So you can set it to like 24 frames a second if you want. And the format, you can set it to MP4. So typically I upload all my video content in MP4 format. I prefer that. But you can use custom options in here as well. And you can select specific custom options if you want to do something more customized, right? But I'll click on YouTube for now. And I'm going to leave it on MP4. And we'll pretty much leave the same settings as it is right here. Right, and you can actually directly upload it to YouTube, but I'm not too familiar with that. I prefer to save my content and then upload it manually myself afterwards. It's asking for file name and location, so I'm going to click browse here, and we're going to go to my desktop, and on my desktop we should have a Davinci Resolve folder, and let's just create a new folder to make life easy, and we'll call it final content. And we'll go into that folder, and it's called Untitled MP4. So let's just call this, Pizza Video -01, because then later, if we want to manipulate or do something else, we can create a Pizza Video -02 and 3 and 4 and so forth, right? We'll click Save, and automatically it gives it the title here and the location. Now we just need to add to render queue. We'll click Add to render queue, and here you can see it's all ready to be rendered. Now we just need to click render all here. Click render all, and it's going to go and render out the video clip. So I'm going to pause the video and wait for this to finish. Okay, the video is finished rendering out. You can see that it's written completed here, and it took only about 44 seconds to render out all of that content. It wasn't a massive video clip, right? It was quite small. So we can go ahead and minimize this, and if we go into this folder on my desktop, we've got all of our content that we've downloaded so far, but we've got final content here, and inside here we've got the MP4 video. Let's just double click that, load it up, and see what it looks like. Okay, so I noticed a bit of a problem here. If I open up this video clip, and I really can't hear any audio, so there's a problem with the export. So let's go and fix that in Davinci Resolve. Let's minimize this, and we can delete this video clip. It's no good to us. It took 44 seconds to render, so it's not the end of the world. But let's just make sure that you don't make that same mistake when you're editing long video clips, right? So in the YouTube options, we need to make sure audio codec is set to ACC. Make sure it's set to ACC here. If it's not, then you may not hear any audio when you're playing it back. I'm going to add this to the render queue, but before I do that, I'm going to change it to video 2, to pizza video number 2, and I'm going to click add to render queue, and we can see the video clip here. I'm going to click render 1 here, and it's going to render out this particular clip, and hopefully we'll hear some audio. Okay, the second version of our video has been exported. So if we minimize this and we see there's a new video clip in here, let's double click it and make sure that we can hear audio. Okay, so the audio seemed to export perfectly fine in that second version. So I'm not quite sure what happened there, but make sure you select that ACC option inside the audio options inside Davinci Resolve when you go to export your content, right? So I think the video looked pretty good. There is some improvements I think that we could make, and the main improvement I think is the fading at the end of the video clip. I think everything else was pretty good, but at the end it kind of, the audio faded out a bit abruptly, so maybe we set that to like a 2-second duration. So if we just quickly open up Davinci Resolve again, and if we go back to the edit timeline, and if we scrub to the very end, we can see that our transition for the audio fade out was set to 2 seconds here, right? And I reckon it would have been better to fade it a lot longer duration, and also probably the fade to black at the end as well. It would have been better to fade that out at a longer duration as well, maybe 3 seconds, and then maybe the audio 4 seconds. But you can just grab these handles and you can just keep dragging it across. Let's grab the correct handle. Let's grab this one here, and we can drag it across to change, in fact it's this one over here, right? The handle here. We can drag it and set it to something like 3 seconds over here, like 3 seconds right here. And then this one we could have set to around 2 seconds, somewhere around here. And I think the fade would have been a bit better with the audio, and the video it would have faded out a lot slower, even slower than that possibly, right? But I think that's fine as a good example of how to edit content, just to give you a key fundamentals of using Davinci Resolve 17. I think we've done pretty well in this tutorial, right? So obviously there's a lot more to Davinci Resolve, but hopefully you have the tools and the knowledge now to go and start editing video content, whether that's on a personal level, whether you're doing it for business or doing it for YouTube, whether you're uploading content to Facebook, it doesn't really matter. You could be editing video content for Instagram and so forth, right? But now you have those key fundamental skills. You can add audio, you can add videos, you can add images, you can manipulate them, cut them, you can add special effects to them, you can add transitions, and you know how to add audio, manipulate the audio, and also how to export the content at the end and do some basic color corrections and add Gaussian blurs and stuff like this. Okay, so I'll be making quite a lot more tutorials on Davinci Resolve. It will be awesome if you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I'll be making more tutorials, and you can find in fact over 600 video tutorials on my YouTube channel on a wide range of subjects, not just Davinci Resolve, Photoshop, GIMP software, spreadsheets, a lot of different types of tutorials, just me sharing my knowledge, right? Okay, that's the end of this tutorial. I hope you find it useful, and I look forward to seeing you on the next DCP web tutorial.